Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking a complicated stack of sources, articles, and a lot of municipal research, and giving you the intellectual shortcut you need to be seriously, thoroughly well-informed.
And today we're strapping on our virtual walking shoes.
We are. We're stepping off the commuter line and into one of Tokyo's most fascinating, most fragile, and honestly least known historical gems, Kyojima.
You know, it really is the absolute antithesis of modern hypercapital Tokyo. I mean, when you think of the city, you think steel, glass, and this constant, almost aggressive vertical renewal.
Right, always building up.
Exactly. But Kyojima, it exists as this chaotic, beautifully time-worn exception. It's like taking a historical deep breath, and it's located right in the heart of the capital.
Our sources rightly paint it, it's there in Sumida Ward, as a Shitamachi wonderland. And that term, Shitamachi, it's so crucial here. It refers to the low city, the old working class, sort of pre-modern heart of Tokyo. And this wonderland, it's this dense labyrinth of narrow alleys. The locals call them roji. And they're filled with structures that just whisper secrets of the Taisho era.
Which was, what, 1912 to 1926?
Exactly, and the early Showa era, so pre-1945. It's a true architectural time capsule.
And that capsule exists because of, well, historical happenstance, which is really the core of our mission today. We need to dissect the unique and often terrifying historical circumstances, the near misses, that allowed Kyojima to keep its pre-war streetscape when, virtually every other surrounding district was flattened.
Not once, but twice.
Twice. And only after we establish that history can we really appreciate the community and the culture, the human fabric that defines this place. And then we have to confront the critical, frankly, existential challenges facing it today.
Primarily the seismic risk.
Primarily the seismic risk, yeah.
Okay, so let's start by grounding ourselves in the specifics. For anyone listening who might know the broader area, Kyojima is situated almost dead center in Sumida Ward. It's about, 1.8 kilometers northeast of the Sumida Ward office?
That's right. And it's almost like an island defined by its borders, which I think really reinforces its distinct identity. It is physically boxed in by these major arterial routes.
Okay.
You've got Meiji-dori to the northeast, Hikifunagawa-dori to the northwest, Ogububashi-dori to the southeast, and then the Tobu-Kamaido line tracks running along the south.
So it's really hemmed in.
Completely. And then you have the north-south spine of the Kaisei rail line cutting through the western section, and Yahiro-Chuodori crossing through the middle. This lack of easy flow, the way it's sort of walled off by transportation arteries, is a big part of why it develops so internally, so introspectively.
And for a little bit of essential trivia, the name itself, Kyojima or Hutra, it's a great shorthand for its location and identity, right?
Yeah.
It's surprisingly straightforward, which is funny for a place that's so complex. The Kyo is just pulled from Tokyo.
Simple enough.
Right, reflecting its place within the capital. And the Jima, that's taken from the neighboring district, Mukojima. So it literally means the island of Tokyo next to Mukojima.
I love that. It's so direct.
It is, and administratively, it's a pretty modern creation. It was only officially established in 1965.
Oh, that recently.
Yeah, as a result of merging older districts, parts of Tarajimacho 4-chom and Azumacho Nishi 1-chom and 4-chom.
That 1965 date is important because it shows that Kyojima as a modern administrative unit is way younger than the actual buildings and the historical events that really defined it.
Absolutely. The name is new, but the bones are old.
Okay, let's unpack this. The survival story. This is what makes Kyojima a historical marvel. Its current, utterly unique physical structure is fundamentally a historical accident. The direct result of avoiding the total destruction of two of the 20th century's biggest catastrophes.
We're talking about surviving the Great Kanto Earthquake of 1923, and then, just over 2 decades later, surviving the devastating WWII firebombing raids of 1945.
And for almost every other dense urban area in the low city of Tokyo, these events meant total erasure, just wiped clean, and then followed by modern reconstruction.
But for Kyojima, they meant something totally different. They meant survival, and then this incredibly rapid, unplanned densification.
Okay, let's start with 1923. The earthquake itself and the fires that followed just flattened huge swaths of Tokyo. But Kyojima's location, and there's some debate as to why.
Yeah, you hear different theories. Maybe specific wind patterns that day, maybe its distance from the main fire zones, or even some slight topographical differences we don't really notice now.
Whatever the reason, it served as a crucial refuge zone for survivors.
And this is where we go from a geographical event to a sociological one. The data point on the population surge is, frankly, stunning. In the immediate aftermath of the quake, Kyojima and the area right around it became a magnet for people who had lost everything.
Everything. Their homes, their businesses, their family.
Everything. And the population of the area nearly doubled almost overnight. Our sources show the estimated pre-disaster population was around 60,000 people.
Okay, 60,000.
After the disaster, it swelled to approximately 120,000.
Wait, a doubling of the population in an area that was already starting to industrialize. That wasn't just development. That was a refugee crisis laid on top of an urban environment.
It was absolute immediate chaos. And it is the single most important factor shaping the Kyojima you see today. This rapid, unplanned influx meant people needed shelter right now.
There's no time for zoning or permits.
None. You can't wait for planned infrastructure or properly laid out housing. People just built. They built quickly, often with makeshift wooden or semi-permanent structures, and they packed them in wherever they could find a little bit of space.
And that's the origin story.
That is the origin story of the concentrated, dense development, the incredibly narrow roji, those maze-like alleys, and the shoulder-to-shoulder nature of the wooden housing that defines the district. The municipal infrastructure just could not adapt. It couldn't keep up with this sudden, organic, explosive settlement.
So the famous density we see today, the reason we call it a labyrinth, is the direct physical legacy of the 1923 disaster and that refugee crisis that followed. It's literally built on desperation and immediate need.
Exactly. And the nature of that density, that closeness, it became a self-perpetuating factor in the neighborhood's social dynamics. We'll get to that later with the Shitamachi Ninya concept, this idea of local warmth. But first, Kyojima had to survive the second big existential threat, the 1945 air raids.
This is where its luck, or maybe just his specific placement, held out again, especially when you contrast it with the utter devastation suffered by the wider Sumida area. The firebombing raids were systematic. They were designed to incinerate Tokyo's dense, wooden, low-city areas.
And they succeeded, almost everywhere else in the Shitamachi. In the wider region of Sumida, the casualties soared to around 25,000 people.
25,000?
With Kyojima, it was relatively spared. The sources indicate that the casualties within Kyojima itself were mercifully lower, around 1,500. Now that's still devastating, but...
But compared to 25,000, it implies that a significant portion of the physical buildings actually remained intact.
Right. It's a stark, almost unbelievable contrast. While huge sections of Tokyo, like areas right next door, were just reduced to ash, Kyojima remained a relatively intact urban island, preserving its haphazard, clustered layout from the 1920s.
And that preservation is the key.
It's everything. Because it was spared, structures built during the Taisho era and the early Showa era, pre-1945, were still standing. We are talking specifically about the Nagaya.
The long, narrow, interconnected row houses.
Exactly. This preservation created a dense, distinct, wood-framed streetscape that is nearly unique in modern Tokyo. When you walk through Kyojima, you are literally walking through the physical manifestation of the 1930s.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because the area's infrastructure, or maybe more accurately, the resistance to upgrading it, actually became the third pillar of its preservation, even decades after the war.
That's such a good point. The very things that made it a dense refuge post-1923, the clustered housing, the narrow lanes, they became incredibly difficult to undo in the post-war era of rebuilding.
Right, because if you look at the 1960s and 70s, many parts of Tokyo underwent these massive urban renewal projects. Wide boulevards, new apartment blocks.
But in Kyojima, local constraints and, crucially, local reluctance just delayed any large-scale hard infrastructure changes, especially road widening.
So what was the nature of that reluctance? Was it financial, or was it a community choice to keep things the way they were?
It seems to have been a combination of factors, but community resistance played a massive role. Our sources have references to the reluctance to push forward with these large-scale land reorganization projects. Sometimes they're known locally as the Gaban Plan.
And a Gaban plan that involves massive, comprehensive land readjustment. Right, so tearing down entire blocks, redrawing property lines, widening streets, and building to modern standards.
It's a total reset.
Yeah.
And that would involve compulsory purchase of land or swapping plots, which would completely destroy the community's physical layout and, of course, displace residents.
People who had lived there for decades.
Precisely. And in a densely packed, tight-knit community like Kyojima, this was fiercely resisted. You have to remember, these are residents whose families had established deep roots after the 1923 and 1945 disasters. They preferred the known difficulties of their current environment over the chaos of massive redevelopment.
So the resistance was powerful enough that the major infrastructure transformation that swept through other parts of Tokyo just stalled here.
It just hit a wall. And so the famous maze-like quality of the narrow lanes, the roji, they are the physical and political manifestation of that delayed redevelopment. The preservation of Kyojima's unique layout wasn't just a physical accident of war, it was a sustained choice by the community to protect their existing homes and their social cohesion.
It's a fascinating historical inversion, isn't it? The very density and narrowness that were born out of trauma and necessity in 1923 became the protected characteristics that allowed the culture to survive in the post-war era.
It's a perfect way to put it. But this preservation, it comes at a profound cost, which leads us directly to the present.
Because that historical legacy, that charming physical time capsule, now presents a truly existential modern dilemma. We have to address the critical, objective reality of the seismic risk Kyojima faces today.
This is the uncomfortable truth that just hangs over the entire district. We celebrate the dense, aging wooden construction for its charm, for its history, but objectively, it poses a severe and measurable disaster risk.
You have these fragile buildings, structures that somehow survived two massive catastrophes, now packed tightly along lanes that are fundamentally inadequate for modern safety standards.
And we don't need to speculate about how severe it is. The sources provide concrete data, specifically from the 2018 Tokyo Metropolitan Government Evaluation. They did this massive survey looking at 5,177 distinct areas across the city, assessing the risk of collapse during a major earthquake.
And the results for Kyojima were not good.
Not good is an understatement. The results are stark. Kyojima 2-com was ranked number 1.
Number 1 in all of Tokyo.
In the entire city. And Kyojima 3-com was ranked number 2 for the risk of building collapse and fire damage during a major seismic event. This is not just a high-risk area. It is, statistically, the highest identified risk zone in all of Tokyo.
That is an incredibly alarming superlative. What specifically drives that ranking? Is it just the age of the buildings and the density?
It's a combination of factors that the metropolitan government indexes. It's the age and the structural vulnerability of the wooden houses, yes. It's the extreme density of those structures. And, critically, it's the inaccessibility.
Meaning emergency services can't get in.
Exactly. If an earthquake causes multiple simultaneous fires, which it would, the density ensures a rapid spread. But more critically, the narrow roji, the very lanes we love for their charm, they prevent modern fire trucks and ambulances from navigating quickly, or in some cases, from getting through it all.
So these dense, clustered wooden blocks become disaster bottlenecks. They could trap residents and emergency personnel alike.
That's the nightmare scenario. The old layout, designed for pedestrian life in the Taisho era, is now fundamentally incompatible with 21st century disaster readiness, and that creates a profound urban gap.
You could see it too. You see a neighborhood physically torn between the past and the future, sometimes just block by block.
Oh, absolutely. Let's just look at Kyojima 1-chom, which is undergoing major infrastructure work right now. You have the Kizi Oshiage line grade separation project and all the redevelopment happening around Kaisi Hikifun Station.
So that's the necessary heavy-duty modernization.
Yeah.
Widening roads, separating rail lines, improving public safety standards in that one section.
Right. That's the future arriving, bringing safety and modern efficiency. But the critical gap is massive.
Yeah.
Kyojima 2 and 3 come the very heart of the historical district. The parts holding those alarming worst place risk ratings, they currently have no scheduled, comprehensive redevelopment plans in place.
So why is that, if the risk is so well documented?
It's an ongoing political and economic challenge. It's incredibly expensive and politically fraught to undertake the sort of land readjustment needed in such a dense, historically resistant area. So you have this wealthy, modern, safe, seismically sound infrastructure arriving in one corner.
Well, the highest risk historical core remains untouched, just waiting for its fate.
And that tension is deeply visual. I mean, you walk through these narrow lanes surrounded by these ancient time-etched tin houses and wooden Nagaya, and then you just look up.
And you see the sky tree.
You inevitably see the massive futuristic silhouette of the sky tree, or you see the gleaming tower apartment complexes near the modernized station. This chaotic, constant juxtaposition, the sleek, high-rise symbols of wealth and modernity, towering over the fragile, low-slung preservation of the old working-class district, it triggers a really mixed emotional response.
One commentator in our source material captured that emotional conflict perfectly. They said, seeing the sky tree towering over the old structures felt almost insulting, like rich and powerful rulers mocking the common people below.
It's a powerful, almost accidental visual metaphor. The physical safety gap between the modern, seismically sound environment and the rickety historical maze is also a gap between access to capital, resources, and time itself. The fragility of the architecture symbolizes the economic vulnerability of the residents who have remained there for generations.
So what does this all mean? The architecture is fragile, the risk is real, but the atmosphere, that famous Shitamachi magic, is incredible. Let's shift our focus now. Let's slow down and appreciate the soft power of Kyojima.
Yes.
The small businesses, the strong Shitamachi Nino, that local warmth and humanity that makes this area truly unique.
This really is the soul of Kyojima. The fabric is woven not from the wood and tin of the buildings, but from the tight-knit community and the entrepreneurial spirit that has persisted since the 1920s.
And it's still a living economic center.
It is. Looking at 2021 data, the area still supports a pretty resilient local economy. There are 511 total businesses and about 3,590 employees, largely centered around the commercial hub of Kyojima One-Come.
But the truly fascinating part is how these specialist and high-level craft businesses are embedded right in the older residential blocks. They're surviving and thriving in the face of all this modernity.
Let's dive deep into some of these examples, starting with Iwazawa Glass or Iwazawa Garasu.
An amazing story.
It's incredible. Iwazawa Glass is a designated Edo glass kiln founded in 1917, so it survived the Taisho era. They are a profound example of industry adapting to and surviving within this dense residential structure. They had to relocate to their current spot after World War II.
Okay.
And what's almost impossible to believe is that their factory still houses the only operational glass dissolution furnace left in all of Sumida Ward.
Wait, a furnace heating glass to 1,500 degrees Celsius. Right there, potentially next to a 70-year-old wooden Nagaya.
That is the reality of industrial Kyojima. They are maintaining an ancient, heavy, dangerous tradition right in a dense residential environment. I mean, can you imagine the zoning, the insurance, the sheer logistical headache of operating a furnace that hot in the highest risk seismic zone in Tokyo?
It's mind-boggling.
Yet they do it. It just emphasizes the deep embeddedness of these crafts. They're not separate from the community. They're part of its core.
And their products reflect this blend of tradition and innovation.
Absolutely. They're masters of traditional Edo-style craftsmanship. They're known particularly for their classic, finely ground soy sauce pours, products that require immense skill to make. But they also embrace modern design, like their sleek Futsutsuki series.
And the factory is accessible to the public.
That's the thing. The fact that this industrial operation is so close that residents can occasionally purchase seconds or specialty items directly from the factory, it just emphasizes that lack of separation between commerce and community.
Speaking of tradition, the presence of Kirishida Soba Hunk, a specialty soba flour mill, is another sign that this area is a hidden engine room for high-end Tokyo craft.
This business has astonishing longevity. It was established originally in 1772 in Nagata before moving its operation to the Bunka neighborhood near Kyojima in 1953. And they're not a restaurant. They are the specialists who supply the specialists.
Right.
They're meticulous. They use about 60 stone mills to slowly grind domestic and international buckwheat into their specialty flour.
So they are essentially the quiet, high-quality suppliers for some of Tokyo's most recognized and famous soba restaurants. They're the backbone of that industry.
Precisely. They are purveyors for noteworthy Tokyo soba shops. But they still adhere to that Kyojima spirit. Despite their high-end client base, they sell their products directly to the public from their office. You can just walk in and buy flour, fresh and dried noodles, soba tea.
An expert operation, cloaked within the everyday residential streetscape.
Exactly.
Now, let's look at how the old architecture is being repurposed, because this seems to be the key to Kyojima's future vitality and its power to attract new creative energy. The use of the Nagaya, those historical row houses, is a defining trend.
It's a beautiful fusion of old constraints and new creativity. The Nagaya structure, by its very nature, implies sharing and closeness. You have multiple units under one long roof, often sharing utilities or pathways.
A built-in community.
A built-in community. And a great example is Tookoko, a leather goods designer and artisan. They operate out of a historic 7-unit Nagaya.
Operating a sophisticated design studio out of a tiny, old wooden structure. Sounds challenging. What's the appeal for them?
The designer noted that the physical constraints actually force intimacy and connection. She loves being able to showcase her worldview in such a unique setting and allowing customers to really feel and touch the products. Their focus is on being environmentally conscious, using leather remnants, sometimes dyed with the traditional shibori squeeze dye technique.
For things like their cube two-way pochettes, which are apparently very popular.
Very. But the real story here is how the physical space dictates the social interaction. This is where we see the Shitamachi Nino in action.
The local warmth.
The designer remarked on the close and charming nature of the community. And this isn't just pleasantries, it translates into practical shared life. She describes how neighbors will spontaneously jump in to help with tasks.
Like what?
For instance, when she needed stainless steel dividers built for her shop, customers who were experts in that field just volunteered their help and expertise. They just showed up and did it.
That's a profound level of community support.
Yeah.
But she also gets requests that sort of blur the line between being a shop owner and being the local utility.
Right, exactly. She gets those classic shitamachi requests, an elderly woman who needs a new hole punched in her belt, or an old man who needs a small patch sewn onto something. The physical boundary between the specialized artisan's studio and the community's practical needs just dissolves.
They trust her. She's integrated into their lives, not just their shopping list.
And that DIY spirit and community interdependency is essential. Even the florist, Not Flower, thrives because of it.
Not Flower is in a building that was a restaurant over 70 years old.
Right. And the owner, Misaki Kato, specifically sought out Kyojima because she was drawn to the town's interesting use of old buildings and its inherent DIY spirit. She sells these high-impact flowers, deliberately contrasting the modernity of her floral art with the antiquity of the setting.
And she gets that same gentle meddling from the neighbors, which, in the context of Shitamachi Nino, is actually a form of deep acceptance and support, isn't it?
It is the local currency of care. Neighbors don't just walk by, they dispense unsolicited but usually helpful community input.
Like what kind of advice?
Oh, you should probably write the price down a little clearer, or why don't you put up a proper sign? It's an indication that they view her success as part of the neighborhood's success. It shows the residents taking ownership of the neighborhood, even if they aren't the business owners themselves.
That spirit connects back directly to the density we discussed earlier. When people live that close together, in shared Nagaya structures for generations, trust and shared responsibility become necessary just for survival.
And this sense of history isn't just felt, it's actively told by the long-term residents. Let's look at Kisa Hakujaden, the coffee shop.
This cafe, which opened in 2021, was founded by a local, Hitomi Yoshi, who converted part of her family's house. Even her storefront, which uses this elegant, hand-drawn Itomoji-style signage, acts as a piece of living local art.
But her family history is a powerful miniature history of Kyojima itself. She explained that the site where her cafe stands was previously both a biscuit factory and a 4-unit Nagaya. Her mother ran a manjiaki shop there. But her father's history, that's the true window into the past.
Her father was a film carrier.
A film carrier, reflecting the fact that this immediate neighborhood, far from being some quiet backwater, once had 4 or 5 local movie theaters. It was an entertainment hub.
That detail is invaluable. It shifts our understanding of Kyojima from just a residential area to a place of local commerce and culture.
And critically, she confirms the history of resettlement. Her father settled here after being burned out of Kamaido during the firebombing raids. This confirms that the 2 waves of survival and resettlement post-1923 and post-1945 are key to the modern community structure.
She remembers the local alleys being packed with children playing traditional games like Bagoma. This oral history, the memory of children playing in the dense, narrow lanes, is so important. It reinforces the human-centric nature of the space. It was a place designed for spontaneous interaction, not for high-speed traffic.
Having these local storytellers, people who have literally lived the history that the architecture preserved, is Kyojima's most irreplaceable asset. It means the past is accessible. It's not hidden away in a museum.
And it seems like that tight community feeling, that ability to connect across generations, extends to the new businesses as well.
Absolutely. Look at Petit Bonheur, the baked goods shop. The owner, Yasuyo Iwakami, uses these high-quality, domestic, additive-free ingredients and provides a small cafe space. And she actually laughs about how, depending on the time of day, the cafe sometimes becomes like an izakaya.
An informal pub.
Right, because customers of all ages just start chatting naturally with each other. Strangers become friends over a pastry.
They become instant neighbors, which is the phrase that truly captures the social atmosphere of Kyojima.
It is the Kyojima magic mentioned in the sources. Visitors often feel an immediate release of their typical Tokyo urban guard. The proximity, the lack of pretension, and the openness of the locals mean that a visitor can slip right into a natural, conversational, and neighborly relationship with residents almost instantly.
Before we move to our final synthesis, we have to touch on some pure trivia and local landmarks that reinforce the uniqueness of this environment. We can't talk about Kyojima without mentioning Mammoth Park.
Kyojima Minami Park. It's this iconic, dynamic centerpiece known simply as Mammoth Park because of its main feature, a dynamic 10-meter-tall giant slide.
10 meters tall.
10 meters. It's described as a test of courage even for adults to slide down. It's this unlikely, playful, and dynamic symbol in such a deeply historic, low-key district. It speaks to the local investment in community life, even if the surrounding structures are ancient.
The transportation, that really sums up the unique time-warp feel that separates Kyojima from the rest of the city.
The Tobu-Kamaido line, which runs along the southern edge, is a perfect example. It's this small, localized, two-car train that connects only 5 stations. It's just a local loop.
It's been described as feeling almost like a sightseeing train.
And it does. It's slow, it's charming, and it's wildly inefficient in the modern sense. But it reinforces the neighborhood's insulation from the massive, high-pressure, hyper-efficient commuter rail networks that define the rest of Tokyo. It contributes to the feeling that you have truly stepped outside of time.
And finally, we should mention the famous resident connected to the area, grounding this historical place in contemporary Japanese culture.
That's right. Comedian Mimura Masakazu, who is half of the duo Summels, has his family home located here. And that connection grounds the area in contemporary Japanese media and confirms that the neighborhood, despite its historical streetscape and its risks, is very much alive and integrated into modern life.
This has been an incredibly deep dive. We've moved from the history of chaos and survival to the present reality of profound charm and critical risk. Kyojima is fundamentally a fragile historical narrative, isn't it? It's existing in this precise and critical balance between its charming, low-slung past and the severe objective need for safety upgrades.
The central paradox is just unavoidable, and it defines its future. How do you implement the modernization and seismic safety measures that are objectively necessary? The widening of roads, the strengthening of structures, without destroying the very character that makes the neighborhood valuable and attracts new creative talent.
Right. If you push forward with that Gaban plan now, paving the Roji, widening the streets, and replacing the old Nagaya with modern, seismically sound buildings, you resolve the safety risk. But you wipe out the history and the unique spatial configuration that fostered the Shitamachi Nino in the first place.
That is the classic urban planning conundrum. But the source material provides a crucial synthesis regarding Kyojima's true value. And we have to reiterate that its key feature is not just its hard architecture, the old buildings themselves, which are beautiful but dangerous, but its soft community spirit.
That tightness, the closeness, and the flow of people and ideas, as one source put it, that's what defines Kyojima's unique, human-centric environment. This atmosphere is the social capital that modern urban areas crave.
And that atmosphere is actively attracting a new generation of creative residents. We see designers, system engineers, cafe owners who are deliberately seeking out and contributing to this unique environment because they crave that sense of community, that closeness, and that authentic texture.
They're tired of anonymous high-rise living.
Exactly. They're drawn to the low-profile density, the idea of living where life is active and where the boundaries between commercial and residential, and even between strangers, are much softer than in typical Tokyo. The ability for a visitor to become an instant neighbor is the primary social magnet.
But here is the final provocative thought we want to leave you with. It's one that builds directly from the current challenges noted in our source material. The sources mention the very recent appearance of minpaku.
Short-term rentals. Airbnbs.
Right. They're starting to pop up in Kyojima's residential core.
And this trend presents a significant, almost insidious threat to the Kyojima magic. If the greatest assets of this neighborhood are its close-knit feel, its strong, long-term community relationships, and the deep local knowledge that enables the Shitamachi Nino and that instant neighbor effect, what happens when housing begins to shift fundamentally?
When the units that once housed long-term residents and fostered that interdependency are converted solely for transient, short-term visitor accommodation, the human fabric begins to fray. If the homes that foster this density and spirit are emptied of long-term residents and repurposed purely for tourists seeking a temporary taste of Shitamachi life, does the authenticity just drain away?
It's a huge risk. Kyojima must manage seismic safety upgrades and necessary modernization while simultaneously ensuring that this new wave of short-term visitation doesn't erase the very foundation, the density of human relationships, and the culture of shared necessity that makes the neighborhood so uniquely valuable in the first place. It is a critical question about urban transformation and cultural preservation that this extraordinary piece of Tokyo history faces right now.
A deep dive into Kyojima's past, present, and its very precarious future is now complete. Thank you for joining us on The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.